Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and every month in 2023 on the Forbes Books Podcast, we highlight a nonprofit that is making an undeniable impact. Today, we're going to talk about Family Equality, whose mission is to advance legal and lived equality for LGBTQ plus families. And my guest is Family Equality's CEO, Stacey Stevenson. Stacey is a speaker, writer, and advocate who last year was named to Out Magazine's Out 100 list, a compilation of the year's most impactful and influential LGBTQ plus people. Stacey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. How are you today?
I'm excellent, and full disclosure, I was not aware of your organization before we set up our chat. So would you mind kicking us off with what Family Equality does and how it came to be?
Absolutely. If I were to sum it up, I would say that Family Equality fights for family and love and freedom. And we have been around for 40-something years. We advance rights for LGBTQ plus people who want to create a family, who want to sustain a family. And we truly believe that everyone should be able to find their family, to form that family, and to sustain that family. We were organized at the first gay lesbian rights march in Washington in 1979.
Wow. Interesting. And how did you find out about the organization? Because I know you've been very transparent about your history and what took you out of Texas and so forth. And I want to get into that. But when did Family Equality get on your radar?
It's interesting. My wife and I, when we were still in Dallas, and this was in 2019, a friend contacted us and said, hey, there's this organization called Family Equality. Have you ever heard of it? And we said no. And she said, well, they're doing a series about families who are LGBTQ plus families living in Texas. It's called Out in Texas. And they want to talk to these families and sort of do like a series about your experience with being a same-sex family in Texas. Would you be interested? And so we went through this, we said yes, we went through this entire interview process with Family Equality, and we were one of two families who were selected for that Out in Texas show. And then after that, that was all that happened. Then this thing called COVID happened. Have you heard of that one? Have you heard of COVID?
Someone was talking about it the other day, but I wasn't like, I didn't believe them. But yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah. So then the pandemic happened, right? And what was really strange in the middle of the pandemic is that I started having what I call COVID clarity. And I had been in the corporate world for 20-something years. It was my path. It was my life. It was my retirement plan. It was everything. It was my third child. It was everything. And I was pretty sure I was going to be there for the rest of my life. And then COVID happened and we were isolated and we had time to think and contemplate life. I couldn't be busied by all of my fancy galas and happy hours with my friends. And that really caused me to really take a step back and ask myself, am I really doing the work that I need to be doing in support of my community? And my answer to myself was no. And at about that time, Family Equality had a CEO position opened. And so in this sort of serendipitous synchronicity sort of, world or situation, it all worked out and I applied for that position.
Wow. And I'm curious because it's such an important job you have now. Was it a bit of a tear to you because you're like, hey, I'm building this family. I'm on this amazing career track. I'm going to make a buco bucks. I'm going to do really well. But if I take this position, I probably won't make as much as I did. How much did the financial aspects weigh in on you?
It weighed in a lot. And I'll have to tell you, my lovely wife, she said, are you crazy? You've worked so hard for this. And if you think a little bit about, my background being someone in South Texas in the early 1990s who was pulled out of the closet in high school and subsequently dropped out of high school and had to have this really tumultuous life and before I ever started to really create a better life for myself. So when you are someone who is a GED graduate and now you are in the conference rooms at Charles Schwab as a senior managing director and you've made it, people kind of scratch their heads to go, why would you give that up? Why would you back away from that and give that up when this is literally your dream and statistically you're not supposed to be here? The financial aspects weighed a huge deal, but the other aspect that my wife and I talked about is that we experienced discrimination when we were building our families, and we believed that I could help more families, that I could do more impactful work at Family Equality. And so we worked it out, and it ended up being the right decision.
And the struggle of the finances aside, because you get two boys, college is really expensive. There's a lot to that. I don't need to mention that to you. You're probably fully aware of that. So you've got the financials locked in, what were the first steps that you wanted to take with family equality? Like you said, an organization that's been there, 40 years. Why did you feel like you were the person that could probably take it to the next level?
A couple of things. I feel that lived experience is really important, and I brought a sense of lived experience from a couple of perspectives. One, having this really tumultuous coming out process in Texas, which ended up being positive in the long run with my parents, et cetera, in the way that I accept myself. The other piece was, again, the discrimination that my wife and I faced, and going through that process in order to create our family was absolutely painful and heartbreaking. And at the same time, we came out on the other side and we adopted our twin boys. So that lived experience of knowing what it feels like when you're trying to simply create something so fundamental, which is just family, and you have all the odds stacked against you. I felt that I could bring that experience. And then the other piece of it is spending 20 something years in corporate America. I really feel that there's a need to bring nonprofit work and the business world together. And I thought that I could bring those two perspectives, lived experience and my business experience too.
And I know it's not relevant to the conversation, but boy, those two sons of yours are cute as hell. I mean, they're they have like the best smiles I've ever seen. Like they definitely look like TV kids. I don't know if that's something you want to do with that. do with it.
They think they're TV kids. I honestly, they think that they're TV kids. And I have to tell you we were at the White House. This sounds so weird. This sounds so strange to say this.
Come
we were
on,
at the White House the
other
day.
You can name drop it. It's all good. Do it.
Who says that? We're at the White House the other day. Family Equality was invited to the White House for the Respect for Marriage signing when President Biden signed it. We had the opportunity to meet President Biden, to meet Vice President Harris, and Secret Service told the boys, they said, look, when she comes up, you are to shake her hand, no sudden moves, no this, no that. They think they're stars. They really don't care. They just ran right up to her, gave her a big hug, and she said, who are you? And then she gave a hug back. But to your point, they are so brave and so bold, and I learned so much from them, but they do think that they are TV kids.
Let's talk about that visit to Washington, because, you dropped it in there. I was going to bring it up, but I'm glad you dropped it in as well there, Stacey. But what an important signing, the Respect for Marriage Act, because I felt, and I'm sure many people across the country felt that with a new... I don't want to get too political here, but with a new Congress, that things were going to change, and a lot of the things that were righted would be wronged again. How important was that signing?
It was huge. I mean, let's talk about not just the signing, but the passing of the legislation. What a huge bipartisan victory. And, we need to see more bipartisan victory. We need to see more bipartisan victory from the perspective of LGBTQ plus rights. So just the passing of that was historic. To have Senator Tammy Baldwin and her peers, her Republican peers, work really hard to get this passed. And then to be there at the signing, Chairlyn and I, my wife, we were married in Victoria, British Columbia before marriage equality was the law of the land in the United States. We were married in Canada in 2007. So to be there for this signing meant so much to us, and to be there with our 8-year-old boys meant so much to us. It was truly a day that we'll never forget.
And the impact that it's going to have going forward, because I remember when that decision was made. Was that Obama signed the Marriage Equality Act? Was that Obama?
Right. It was in 2015 when Obergefell versus Hodges was passed. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And I think a lot of people were scared that that a lot of that was going to be reversed. Were you in that camp of like, oh no, what's going to happen now, where we get all these extremists coming in and they're going to try to pretty much undo? Were you at any point worried that there was a possibility that could happen?
I was not worried until the Dobbs decision happened and Roe versus Wade had been overturned. And when Justice Clarence Thomas suggested in his opinion that we should revisit key cases such as marriage equality or Obergefell versus Hodges, and he named some others, Griswold versus Connecticut, et cetera, he mentioned that we should rethink or relook at these cases. And when that happened, we were all, when I say we, collectively, we in the movement and LGBTQ plus people and families were really concerned. And that is why our Democratic peers and our Republican peers actually got into action and got the Respect for Marriage Act passed. Now, look, marriage equality is still the law of the land. Nothing has changed there. But should the court overturn marriage equality, should the worst happen, then we do have the Respect for Marriage Act.
And one of the things that you mentioned about the fact that, your childhood and you had to move to another place that was more accepting. To me, it's I'm a middle-aged white dude, so I've never had to experience things a lot of people have to experience. But to me, it's really heartbreaking that there's parts of this country that people are forced to leave because of the people around them. Most of your work is on a national level, but how do we work into the local level? Because I feel like that's where a lot of these problems are arise, where all these local legislators are passing all these laws. You have the louder voices down to the ground level. Is it just as easy as like, hey, maybe you're better off leaving blank state or blank city and going somewhere else? Because I feel like that shouldn't be the way, but unfortunately, that's the way it's become.
Yeah, it's difficult. For now, where we are hearing from many families, people who just simply want to leave their home states. And I believe that for now, I wouldn't want to tell anyone stay put, things are going to get better, because it truly has become a safety issue for many. Yeah. And so I would say that for now, I think when people feel unsafe, that they should do what makes them feel comfortable and what's best for their families. And at the same time, how do we get down to the local level? Family equality and organizations, peer organizations, have to meet people where they are, meaning going out into these states and having conversations, whether it be with the legislators or whether it be with families, teaching people how to advocate for themselves, working with some of our peers to help LGBTQ plus parents know how to join school boards, which, some of these decisions are being made at the school board level, right? Mm-hmm. And I really think it's up to the LGBTQ plus movement organizations to go out to these places, into the states, meet people where they are and talk with people, so we can hopefully make some change and proactively fight some of these bills. But I will say that we have a long road ahead of us to do so. I mean, there are already approximately 250 anti-LGBTQ plus bills that have been introduced. We ended the year last year with about 340 or something along those lines. And now we are only at the end of January and we are already at 250. Now, some of those could be carryovers, but the point is, we have never seen anything like this before. It is absolutely unprecedented.
And the problem in politics, and I know it's a loaded statement, but I think the problem now is that a lot of our politicians are playing to the lowest common denominator or the loudest voice. These 200 and something anti-LGBTQ laws are, if you think about it, the people that are writing these laws probably don't give a crap about it. They probably honestly don't even know what half of that stuff means, but they're playing to their base. And I think that's why we're in a sad state of affairs, where it's all these laws that are being written that people, generally, I'm sure many of these politicians are good people, but the fact that they're like, oh, listen, the only way I'm going to be reelected is if I get the loudest voices on my team. So how do we combat that when you have these people who have a lot of power just really playing to such a small minority of people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so the one thing I want to say, going back to the 250. These have not been passed, but they still have an impact, right? Because they've been introduced. Yeah. And even introduction sends a message out to your constituents that they are not included, right? I feel like when you think about the legislators that you're mentioning and the folks who are sort of playing to a very small but loud contingent of people, they are responsible for all of us. If you're a legislator, your responsibility is to be a person of the people, to protect the people, to have a voice of the people, not just the loudest few, not just a loud few. That's absolutely ridiculous. So when I think about that, I think it's important that we reach out to these legislators. One of the projects that we took on last year at Family Equality was really getting very intentional about bipartisanship, as I mentioned earlier, and finding the people who, and I hate to say this, but this is a term that everyone uses, on the other side, but finding Republican folks who had an interest in understanding why LGBTQ plus rights, specifically family rights, were really important. And we had these conversations. We had a beautiful house party at one of our Republican donors' houses, who's also a gay dad. The next day, we had a conversation with Republican legislators and also people who are Democrats, and about family rights and LGBTQ plus family rights. And we had this beautiful conversation. And I think that the more we do that, the more that maybe we can use their help to talk to their peers who maybe are not there yet. I think the other thing is that there's a contingent of people that are maybe conflicted and they don't know where they stand. And I think we have a responsibility to educate those people as well. But when they're playing to this very small contingent of people, I think using the power of their own networks and talking to them and talking to their peers who can also relay the message to them may be a strategy. I don't know if it's foolproof, but it may be a strategy.
Yeah. And the scary thing about it, Stacey, is the fact that being a congressperson, whether Senate or in the House, it's a really great job, and the job requirements are really low. It's a really low barrier of entry. You just got to get enough people to vote you into that office. And these people will do whatever it takes to keep these jobs because they like having a jet and they like having a staff. And I think the incentives for them to do their job are just not there anymore. Their job is to be reelected. I always joke that like publicists, like their number one job is not to get fired. So I think politicians are like that too. We're like, my main thing is just make sure I keep getting voted in. And if it means writing some arcane bill that will get some press on a conservative outlet or somewhere else, then I'll just keep doing this as long as I get reelected. So the incentives, I don't think, are there for these political leaders. I mean, again, we're not going to solve this in this conversation, but I think that is such a big part of this whole conversation.
Yeah, and that's just mind-blowing to me because, I mean, I don't understand what you're saying, and at the same time, there's a downstream impact that they're not thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
There's a downstream impact in terms of people like myself who left my home state of Texas to come to D.C. I have privilege to leave. We picked up and we left. But we left our trusted network of grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles. And I think about the LGBTQ plus families who don't have privilege and they are leaving in the middle of the night to escape Texas. We know a family who did that. I think about the mental health aspects that are the downstream effects of them just signing some arcane bill and not thinking about this. They're supposed to support all of us. And, there are 11.3 million American adults who identify as LGBTQ plus. Many of them have or are considering building their family. And then there are 3.7 million children under the age of 18 who have an LGBTQ plus parent. What about them? How do you get them to think about this is an American thing. We are all Americans. I sometimes say that we are treated like fractional citizens because we get all of the responsibilities of being a citizen, but with half the rights and little safety. And we deserve full citizenship.
Does it bother you because you're obviously a brilliant person and you read all these bills that are being introduced? Does it bother you when you start reading them and you say to yourself, like, what's the point of this bill? Like, who's this bill help? Like, who are these bills or all these, whether it's these political actions that are taking place that are against the LGBTQ plus community? Is that at the end of the day, like what gets you, like, what's the point of this? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you stopping people from marrying each other, from starting families? Because that to me is the root of it. Like, why? Where does this all come from?
Yeah, it does bother me. And it's interesting because one of my 8-year-olds yesterday on the way to grab some bagels or juice or something like that, he was talking about that. And my kids are very aware of what's going on because we had to move, etc. And we were talking about the why. I really think that the why comes down to fear, a lack of communication. And, I have to say this. I was watching a documentary the other day and it said every act of hatred and destruction begins with the act of self-hatred and self-destruction. And I think we're not thinking about that. I mean, there's this veil of religion that people love to say, oh, this is religious. This is religion. This is my religion. No, that's just a cover up. It really is a lot deeper than that. It's fear. It's lack of communication. And a lot of times it is self-hate and self-hatred. And you can't truly love yourself if you are hell-bent on destroying other people. We need to be thinking about not how do we prevent Stacey and Sherilyn from having a kid. What about protecting the most vulnerable in this country? Our children, our homeless people, our elderly. Why are we not focused on that? Why are we trying to prevent people who are just loving, who want to create a family and want the American dream just as anybody else? Why are we trying to stop that? And it's really down to those things I said: fear, lack of communication, self-hatred, power. It's all of those things when we really should be focused on protecting each other and the most vulnerable.
I try to keep things very simple, Stacey, as you could probably tell from this conversation. But I mean, if we just were nice to each other, or at least were like not mean to each other, man, life would be really easy, wouldn't it? If
it would
not
be
even nice.
So easy. It would be so easy.
You don't have to go out of your way and be nice. Just maybe don't be mean. Like if you can't be nice, if you don't have that gene, go ahead and just not be mean to people.
Just don't be mean, right? And don't infringe upon my God-given rights. We all have the same rights, per our Constitution. Just don't infringe my rights. And if I want to have a child, then I'm going to have a child, right? And if that's not something that you believe in, then okay, then you don't have to try to destroy me, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really sad. So when I'm reading the bills are tough, and hearing the news is tough, and at the same time I feel pulled, right, to do more about it.
Yeah. And let's talk about the day-to-day of family equality. How do you support couples that want to adopt children? How difficult is that today? Can you just give us a little behind the scenes in terms of like folks in the LGBTQ plus community who want to adopt children or have children? Like, how difficult is that? What kind of barriers are set up for folks?
As it relates to children and adopting children, you should be able to adopt and foster a child as you wish. But there are still 12 states that allow a child welfare agency to reject a qualified LGBTQ plus person who wants to open their home to love a child if they believe that you are not aligned with the agency's religious beliefs. Ugh. Now, people will say, 12 states, that's not a lot, but it actually is a lot. Yeah. If you probably think about the number of people who are potentially getting rejected, I think about the Michigan couple who asked their caseworker, talked to their caseworker about adopting a child, and I believe that he was 9 years old at the time, and the caseworker said no, because you are a lesbian couple. And 5 years later, that child was still in foster care. I think about that impact. I think about, the 120,000 children who are in foster care who are still waiting for their forever home, while an LGBTQ plus person could foster or adopt that child. So there's still some challenges. And I will also say that even though we can get married, even though, I mentioned those 12 states, there are still legal, social, and economic barriers that prevent LGBTQ plus people from starting and protecting our families.
Yeah, because if you think about it, at the end of the day, there's probably one person that rubber stamps these things after, I'm sure, months and months of interviews and such and background checks. But then there's this one individual who maybe, for lack of a better word, is homophobic and doesn't believe in that gay people can adopt or have children. And so, is that a case? Am I formulating some sort of Netflix movie in my head, or can it be just one person stopping that from happening?
I mean, that it can be, and I don't have any of the specifics that align to that movie, but it's a really bad. I'm not judging. It's a really bad movie only because of the way that things go down. But you think about that caseworker, that person was the end all be all to that couple's dream of becoming parents, to fostering this child. So yes, and you also mentioned how do we support couples or families? A lot of our work, and like a huge part of our work, is policy work. And the reason that we got invited to the White House for Respect for Marriage is because we also helped pass that legislation along with our peers. And we have many pieces of legislation that we help pass every year, and at the federal and state level. So policy work is a huge piece of our work when you think about the day-to-day, going back to that. And then we also provide resources for LGBTQ plus couples in terms of, what does it mean to adopt? What does it mean to foster? What are the options that are available for me? We have support groups for couples as well when they are starting to think about having a family. And then we also host the largest LGBTQ plus family gathering in the world called Family Week every year in Provincetown. I'm not sure if you've ever been there.
Never been, but I heard it's a party. I hear Provincetown's fun.
There's a lot of parties that happen there. When we go in the end of July, all families take it over. Last year we had almost 600 families from, I believe it was 35 states and 9 countries. We had people from Paris, France come in.
Wow.
And it is the safest week for us because even if you live in a really progressive area, oftentimes you're the only LGBTQ plus family in your neighborhood. And so to come to this week in Provincetown for this 1 week of safety and joy and celebration and lobster bakes and all sorts of great things, it is amazing. So that's a big piece of our programming, is doing Family Week. We've been doing it for about 28, 29 years.
Most companies, as you know, working in business, you set KPIs, you set OKRs, you set budgets and P&L.
Oh, you're speaking my corporate language there.
Yeah. So how do you, now that you moved into a family equality, what do you deem success? Like what are the I don't know, again, KPIs, or what are the numbers? How do you judge what is successful in what you're doing, Stacey?
Yeah, it's interesting. My team is going to kill me if I say KPIs again. They're like, "Oh, geez, this corporate person, can you stop saying key performance indicator?" One of my favorite terms. One of the ways, there's several ways actually. I'll give you a couple ways that what we see as success. I mentioned the Respect for Marriage Act, and that was success. We spent a lot of time talking to Republican senators' offices, bringing families into Zoom calls to talk to those Republican senators' offices to say, this is why our families matter. This is why we should have the right to continue to be married or to get married. Our team spent a lot of time convening and having those conversations. And so there's an impact to that. So when that was passed, we saw that as success. The other way that we see success is growing the number of families that we can reach. And we are on the road to ensuring that we are a place for all families. And we've not always embraced or maybe focused on families who are, say, at a different socioeconomic level, to be quite honest, or families who are part of the BIPOC community. So what we're doing now is that we're going into those communities. And we are going to do something called the Family Equity and Justice Project, where we go into rural communities and we survey LGBTQ plus families who are at or below the poverty line. What would be successful about that project is ensuring that those families feel included at family equality and don't feel that we're not a place for them because they've largely been left behind. And I think the other way I mentioned, Family Week, is growing the number of families that actually get to Family Week is huge for us. Ensuring that the number of people who know about Family Week can actually come to Family Week, and that we can continue to support families and just be a place of safety. And I lied, there's one other. And then continuing to ensure that these bad bills don't pass. That's a huge part of our success.
And there was a piece in The Advocate that said, we're fighting a well-funded anti-LGBTQ plus machine. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is a machine that you're up against. And so, again, keep your corporate hat on, Stacey. Don't take that one off yet. But how do you fund against this behemoth of just people throwing in money to stop people from adopting children, getting married, whatever horrible thing they're trying to do? How do you deal with the monetary aspect when it gets down to it, the brass tacks, the money?
Exactly. I am thankful and grateful to have a solid network of longtime donors. We have a solid network of longtime donors who have been with Family Equality, a lot of them from the beginning, or been with us for decades or so, or the last decade, whose children who have grown with the organization. Those folks continue to fund us. We have the Broadway community, to be quite honest. One of our biggest galas that we have is May 15th, Night at the Pier in New York. You're invited. And we have a huge support system of our Broadway community. And then we have corporations, and I'm keeping my corporate hat on because coming from corporate America, one of the first things that I did is I talked to the organizations that I used to work for, that my wife used to work for, and said, look, here's why this is important, and here's why you should support family equality. And thankfully, they signed on. So it really is having a consistent network of donors, being able to tell the story of the why it makes sense, because some people will go, wait, LGBTQ plus families, what does that mean? And understanding how to tell that story in a way so that your donors know why, that they need to support us. But we do have a very dedicated and consistent pool of donors that I'm so grateful for.
Awesome. And lastly, you're coming up on your 2-year anniversary at Family Equality.
You've done your research.
I try, Stacey. Well, listen, as you could tell, I'm not very bright, so I need to do research.
Oh, stop.
I'm not. So you've been here 2 years. Tell me about the next 2 years. What are you hoping the next 2 years look like? Because we've talked about what you've been busy. You've been pretty busy the last couple of years. What are the next couple of years looking like for you, Stacey?
What are the next couple of years looking like for us? This is where I'll start. ensuring that people know that we exist. And we have been around for 40-something years, and not a lot of people know about family equality, and I think that's a shame. And so we are going to fix that by ensuring that we have a digital strategy that ensures that that's where you can find people now, right? On TikTok, or see, I called it TikTok again. That's how
Show
old
your
I
age,
am.
Stacey. Jeez.
I'm nearly 50 and I keep calling it TikTok, and my kids keep making fun of me. But that's where you find people now, right? You find them on social media. This is where the millennials and the, I think it's Generation Z, who also want to create families. This is where those folks are. This is where they are. So we will ensure that we have a digital strategy that can reach more people. We will continue to fight for our children's rights to have a safe space in schools where they can talk about their family. So we just hired our first director of education and policy, a brilliant lawyer here in DC, and he is going to help us fight those don't say gay bills at the state level. And there's word, unfortunately, of a federal don't say gay bill that they're thinking about introducing. So continuing to ensure that we are being visible in schools. And I think the last piece of it is ensuring that we are still a place for families. Oftentimes people tell me, well, how do you differentiate family equality from other organizations? I mean, there's other orgs who say that they focus on family, but we're truly a place for family. We're a place for family. People can come to Family Week. They can come to the peer support groups that I mentioned to you. We truly are a place where people can come for safety. Not just a nonprofit, but we are truly a safe place for families.
Awesome. And I know you're a self-professed gastronome. Are you missing the barbecue from Texas being in DC? How's that experience been like?
You know what? There's so much good food here.
But barbecue though, Stacey, I mean,
barbecue is good, but you know what? I'm on this pescatarian journey right now.
Okay.
So it's I guess I wouldn't be eating it, but the food here is just great. And my wife and I had sushi last night, and so that was good. So I'm enjoying all of the food that DC has to offer, and then New York, right? It's literally right down the street, as we would say in Texas, and so I'm enjoying when I'm there on business. I ensure that I pop into somewhere and get a good meal.
Good, awesome. I was worried about, of all the things I was worried about, was you leaving Texas, because whenever I talk to anyone from Texas, it's like, yeah, the barbecue doesn't compare to anywhere else. So I wonder if that was one of the big struggles. Although right now you have to worry about that being a pescatarian right now, but I was just curious how you're handling that.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised my dad has not sent me an entire brisket, but I'm sure it's on the way.
Oh, you're getting me hungry. All right. Well, Stacey, it's just been a pleasure talking with you. Good luck in 2023.
Thank you.
And thank you for enlightening me, because I think the problem with our country, and again, I hate to get on my soapbox, is we have stopped being curious. We all got to a certain age where we stopped asking questions. We stopped being curious of what people think, why people were thinking a certain way, or why people do certain things. And so the idea of like creating forums for conversations and people asking, why do you do this? Why do you live this way? What just asking questions, I think, and if they're coming from a good place, if we all did that, we'd be in so much of better. I know we talked about just not being mean to people, but like if we were just more curious about what people were going through, man, I think we could just get a lot more done if we just ask each other things, as opposed to just like shouting or staying in our own silos and not. I don't know if you noticed, Stacey, like with Twitter, all of a sudden they have like that For You thing where now they're suggesting content, and I see people complain like, "Oh, why am I seeing all these conservative voices on my Twitter?" I'm like, I mean, that's not such a bad thing, right? To sometimes hear what other people are saying. And I think we just got to get out of our silos and just experience what other people experience, right?
I agree with you. More curiosity, more listening. And I mean, again, at the end of the day, we're all human. We're human. Take off the labels, take off the party lines. Can we just have a conversation? We're all humans. We need to all remember that.
Well said. Stacey, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
I did too. And to find out more about Stacey and family equality, go to familyequality.org. And that wraps up this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.